Hey, can you see it full screen now, Louise?
Yep.
Excellent, good. I shall start. Well, good evening and thank you. I really am feeling very honoured to be on the same stage as Dave Goulson and Keith Herbert. I hope I won't get as much trouble in my Q&A as Keith might get. So I hope you'll all treat me gently. So I'm going to talk about highway runoff. I'm going to talk about how you look at it in a catchment-based approach, and I will touch on the legislative framework of controlling, well, theoretically controlling discharges of highway runoff to the water environment. I work for a little charity called Stormwater Shepherds, and we are dedicated to reducing pollution from urban surfaces. But I do focus very much on highway runoff. When I fixed it, I will start to focus on something else. So it'll be a canter through this. Don't panic. I don't expect you to take it all in. There will not be an exam at the end, but it's just to give you a flavour. And if you're particularly interested in it, then come back to me and we can do things in more detail, more slowly. But just for this evening, I'm going to give you a teaser session, really. To start with, we know that highway runoff causes pollution. That might seem like a strange place to start, but that's important because it removes all that backwards and forwards ping pong with the regulator about is it pollution, is it not pollution, is it legal, is it not legal? It causes pollution. That's black and white. This outfall on the right hand side is the one near my house, so the one that I spend most time visiting, and it discharges that runoff directly into the River Lostock with no treatment of a motorway that carries about 130,000 vehicles a day. So you can see how gruesome that is. Little bit of chemistry, don't panic. You just need to focus on the red boxes, really. So on the right-hand side, you can see the River Lostock upstream in the park. This is the first sample that I take, and it fails two of the published standards. That's what the red box signifies. So there is a little bit of pollution upstream. There's an Asda car park and another couple of highway discharges. But then we come down to the park and I sample a motorway outfall, which is in the first column. And you can see that there are a lot of the boxes go red. That means it's failing the published environmental standard for those chemicals. And those chemicals, benzoapyrene, benzo-GHI, they are called polyaromatic hydrocarbons. They are hydrocarbon derivatives, and they come out of your exhaust pipe, they come out of your tyres, they come from leaks of drips of hydraulic oil, and any other oils and fuels that end up on the carriageway surface. So you can see that the discharge from the motorway is grossly polluted. It fails all of the polyaromatic hydrocarbon standards. And what's important is that then means that the river downstream is also polluted and also fails the standards. That's really important if you're campaigning on this topic, because that means that this outfall is constituted, it is contributing to a failure of the environmental quality standards in the river, which means it's causing pollution. Black and white, no argument. Strict liability criminal offence. It would be nice if somebody recognised that, but I promise you it's true. So there are polyaromatic hydrocarbons in this runoff. Those are the ones we've just looked at. There are also microplastic tyre wear particles. So this little image on the right is from a friend of mine called Florence, and this is an electron microscope image of microplastic tyre wear particles. And these, we think, somebody estimated there are 63,000 tonnes of microplastic tyre wear particles discharging off British roads into British rivers and seas every year. And it's recognised as being the largest terrestrial source of microplastics in our oceans. So it's an horrific part of highway runoff. It's quite a new kid on the block, but it's truly horrific. And there's all sorts of research. I wouldn't recommend it. It's grim. These particles are in the brains of octopus. They're in the placenta of marine mammals. They carry pollutants with them. They leach pollutants from themselves, and they cause physical harm within the creatures as well. They're truly horrible. And also, if that weren't bad enough, we've got copper and zinc. Lots and lots of copper and zinc in highway runoff. Mostly comes from brake pads and clutch pads, and a little bit from your tyre. And toxic. That's toxic to fish, toxic to aquatic invertebrates, and bioaccumulative. So it never breaks down. Copper and zinc are elemental. They just build up in the sediment, they build up in the plants, they build up in the creatures that eat them, and they move up the food chain. So toxic, bioaccumulative, and recognised to be the reason why our British rivers are not recovering at the rate they should be recovering at. So this stuff is horrible. This stuff is worse than sewage, as far as I'm concerned, um, because of that toxic bioaccumulation and the toxic effects, worse than sewage, and causes harm across the aquatic ecosystem. That little chap on the right is a mayfly nymph. You're probably all very familiar with those. I fished him out of a river. We were counting insects as part of a river fly survey. And part of the problem for me, and this might sound a bit odd, is that highway runoff doesn't kill them. If the highway runoff had killed all the insects and fish, we would have fixed it 30 years ago because we knew it was causing pollution 30 years ago. The problem is, if it is a problem, is that the runoff causes sublethal effects. So it causes all those things you can see on the screen, embryonic deformities, failure to copulate, failure of eggs to hatch, abortions, failure to grow, failure to thrive. It also affects the behavior of the insects. It has a slightly narcotic effect. So they're a bit kind of woozy, which means they can't chase their food and they can't run away from their predators. So all these layered sublethal effects have an effect on the insect population in the river and on the fish and on the things that eat those creatures. But then, generally speaking, does not cause widespread death, and therefore nobody does anything about it because, frankly, they don't see it because they don't look. So horrific, but unnoticed. And that, I'm sure you're all aware, that then has an effect on the whole ecosystem. The beautiful photograph I pinched off Flickr from Paul Maffel, which shows a bird eating a mayfly, which we all know that part of that bucolic image of the English countryside with the sun shining and the mayfly hatching and the birds feeding. That's exactly what we recognise as our aquatic ecosystem. And yet, if you kill or suppress the population of mayflies, you affect that entire ecosystem. Fecal indicator organisms are also in highway runoff. The sewage people think they've all got the upper hand on FIOs, but they haven't. We found there's very little research into this, but some samples we took 4 or 5 years ago, we found 1 million coliforms in one sample of highway runoff near Warrington, which is far higher than you'll ever find in sewage outfalls or generally find in sewage outfalls. We don't really know where it comes from. We don't know why there are fecal indicator organisms in highway runoff. Generally speaking, people don't poo on the motorway, in my experience. So where are they coming from? This was motorway drainage. It wasn't a suburban road where people might stop and relieve themselves in the cold in the lay-by. This was a motorway. So there will be some roadkill, and there will be some rats and birds, but not much. So we wonder, and this is a research hypothesis if anybody fancies it, we wonder if the gully pots, if you imagine the gully pot at the side of the road and all that stuff goes in and then it gets warm and stops raining and everything just sort of simmers in the bottom, then we wonder if that's what's happening. And then it rains and washes that out and you get this massive load of fecal indicator organisms. But we don't know. Microplastics I've mentioned, but it's worth remembering that tyre wear particles and road paints and road surface attrition, things like that, are the largest source of microplastics in the ocean. And that's a massive problem and one we're choosing to overlook to some extent. If you're on X, I know very few people are these days. Richard Kirby is worth following. He studies marine plankton and often posts about the amount of microplastic he finds in his samples. But this was a fascinating image. This arrow worm is choking on a plastic microfiber. And we forget about these effects at microscopic level then have knock-on effects throughout the entire global ecosystem. And if we kill all our plankton, we're in serious trouble. That's enough science. I will stop there with the science because it's quite heavy going. If it fascinates you, then go away and read this report, which I wrote with SciWem last year. And there's a lot more of the detail in there. And there are thousands of research papers if you're really interested. So why is nobody doing anything about this? You may throw up your hands, especially in light of the fact that some poor lady was fined 150 quid for pouring some coffee down a drain today, which was on the news. This has been going on for 30 years. Why is nobody doing anything? There's another image there. That's an outfall from the A66 in Cumbria. into a beautiful little Cumbrian fell that comes down off the fells, almost pristine. And then that happens. And that's a mixture of highway runoff and agricultural runoff all in one pipe. Just to give you a double whammy, grossly polluted, toxic, breaching the environmental quality standards, and no regulatory control at all. What's supposed to happen, and some of you may be familiar with this process, is that all known discharges of polluting matter into the water environment should be controlled using a permit from the Environment Agency or Natural Resources Wales, if you're in Wales. And so you would have that, you would own that outfall, you would apply to the environmental regulator for a permit. They would model the extent of pollution from that outfall, and they would say, oh, okay, Louise, thank you for applying. You need to remove 70% of the pollution in your treatment system before you can discharge, and that will prevent pollution in the river. That's the system that's supposed to work. It works for other things. I was going to say it works for sewage, but I'm sure you'd all disagree. But sometimes it works for sewage, but it works for industrial discharges. So that's the concept of the process. And if that was Louise's outfall and she was applying to the environmental regulator, she would have to pay about £8,000 for that application, and that would generate money, which the Environment Agency could use to regulate these discharges, and it would generate the delivery of thousands of treatment schemes, which would be good for the British economy. And who knows, we need some help with our economy right now. That's what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't happen at all. There isn't a single permit in England for a highway outfall, a gravity-fed highway outfall anywhere. And the environmental regulator has never served notice on a highway outfall. But that's what's supposed to happen. The regulator is supposed to identify a highway outfall that's causing pollution, serve notice on the operator, and then the operator applies for a permit. And because these discharges contain priority hazardous substances, those red boxes and the copper and the zinc, the Environment Agency actually has a statutory duty to do this work, because they have a statutory duty to regulate all known discharges of priority hazardous substances. So the fact that this isn't happening is dreadful. It's beyond dreadful, and it isn't happening anywhere. Just a shout out for groundwater as well. You, I suspect, have groundwater where you are. Yeah, Louise is nodding. That's good. And some highway discharges go to ground. This is a particularly horrific example. This is on the A3M, just north of Portsmouth, near Waterlooville. And the runoff from the A3M comes off the side of the road and goes straight into that ditch. And the rubber berms are there to hold the flow back, to encourage it to flow down into the ground. Now you can see in the photograph that that's going directly into the chalk. I could pick it up and touch it while I was there. And so that the level of pollution going into the chalk aquifer there is completely unmeasured. Nobody measures the runoff, nobody measures the groundwater beneath that device, and nobody knows whether that's causing pollution or not. And again, that should be regulated, and it isn't. So what can we do? We don't panic. It's all gloomy. I promise it's not all gloomy. There are things we can all do. So catchment partnerships, wildlife trusts, rivers trusts, and smaller river action groups are the power behind this movement. You are all allies, we are all allies, and we can drive this forward. We need to collect evidence, take photographs, find these outfalls on our catchment, and then complain to everybody. Write to the Environment Agency, why are you not regulating this discharge? Write to the local authority, why are you not treating this discharge? Write to the Minister for the Environment and say, why are you not doing anything? The benefit of doing that is the more we drive it forward, the more we will see the delivery of solutions. And so that little image on the right is a rain garden that's been built recently in a town called Mansfield. And Mansfield got 75 million quid to reduce flooding, but also to reduce surface water going into the sewage infrastructure. And these rain gardens are fantastic for that. So the road runoff from that little cul-de-sac goes into the rain garden, soaks into the soil in the rain garden. The pollutants are captured in the soil, they're taken up by the plants, they're degraded by sunshine, and you also get flood risk management and a beautiful flower garden near your home. So if we all push together, we will see more of those things being delivered by our local highway authorities. And they need to be well designed, but if well designed, they can be excellent. But on your catchment, just think about the whole of your river catchment and where these outfalls are. This is my catchment where I live. So this is the River Douglas, and there are 42 motorway outfalls into the River Douglas catchment. So we've got a length of the M6, a length of the M61, a little bit of the M65, and a teeny weeny bit of the M58, all draining into the upper reaches of the River Douglas catchment. Not a one of those has treatment on it, or at least, should I say, not one of those has effective treatment on it. There are a couple of ancient treatment devices. And you need to start to unpick that for your catchment. But I get told off a lot for only talking about motorways. So here's the slide to back that criticism away. You do need to think about other roads as well. So this is the rest of the River Douglas catchment, and we've got the A59, which is quite busy. That's it's the Preston bypass. So some of you might be familiar with that if you've ever been there. Quite a busy part of Lancashire, and so you have to think about runoff from those roads as well. The thing that dictates how polluting the road runoff will be is generally the traffic levels. There are other things as well, but we tend to be driven by traffic levels. For the motorways, you can find that, but also for local roads, you can find that. So this is a website called roadtraffic.dft.gov. It's freely available, and you go to where you live and you find these little black dots, and you press on a black dot, and it tells you what the traffic loading is for that road. So that's a really useful resource because you can look at your catchment, and you can find the motorway outfalls, and you can work out where the highway outfalls are off the other roads, because it'll just be wherever a river crosses a road crosses a river. And then you can start to map them and go, okay, here's our catchment. This is where we think we've got highway outfalls. Let's go and have a look. And it's a relatively straightforward desk-based exercise to start with. And then you have to go and find them. So this is the one near my house again. So I found this. I had a dot on a map, and I went to where the dot on the map was on a rainy day, and there it was. It's relatively easy to find if you go in the rain. And the discharge generally is this dark grey colour. Occasionally, like the other one, if it's mixed in with agricultural runoff, it can be a bit brown. But generally, it's dark grey, and that sets it aside from sewage. So sewage, you're probably familiar with sewage pollution, but that's generally brown. This is dark grey. So if you find a dark grey or black discharge into your water environment when it's raining, the chances are it's highway runoff. It'll change a little bit for rural roads where you've got soils blowing onto the road and farming activities, but for hardcore motorway runoff, it's dark grey. And this is another one, just to give you a couple of examples what you're looking for. This is a horrific one, particularly because that's the watercourse. That is Sid Brook. It's protected in law. The legislation says it must be a thriving watercourse able to support an aquatic ecosystem, but it's completely subsumed by motorway runoff. And there's no treatment, and there's no plan to put any treatment. Nobody measures it. But you'll find outfalls like that on your catchment too. And that's another one. The interesting thing about when I can't sample it because the river's too wide, and it's not safe for me to march across in my wellies. So I've never sampled that one. Sampling is miserable. I can't beat about the bush. You have to go out when it's pouring with rain. It's no good going out in the drizzle. You have to go out when it's pouring with rain, and you take a sample can and you catch a sample of the pollution. There are other things you can do instead, which I'll talk about at the end. I do that sometimes, but it costs me £200 for every one of those samples to be analysed. And we're a little teeny weeny charity, so we can't really afford it. So I don't do as many as I would like. Not only do I not do as many as I'd like, the Environment Agency don't do any. So there are no monitoring points on the Environment Agency monitoring network that are specifically located to measure pollution from highway runoff. Not one. And so this pollution is going unmeasured. And even when they do take river samples on their Water Framework Directive classification sampling, they rarely measure for polyaromatic hydrocarbons. So they don't find them. So then when I go and say, Sid Brook is polluted, they go, well, we can't see any evidence of highway pollution in our classification sampling point. So I said, well, have you analysed for polyaromatic hydrocarbons? And they said, oh, no, because we don't expect to find them because we don't have any highway discharges. You can imagine how often I beat my head on my desk. It's so frustrating they know that pollution is there, but because it's not recorded, they don't monitor for highway runoff signature pollutants. so they don't find them. So then they say, what pollution? We know nothing. That's frustrating. The water framework directive classification points are often far downstream of these outfalls as well, so that again they won't find the pollutants. So they once again throw their hands up and say, "What pollution?" And also, if you won't catch if you don't go out in the rain. So I don't know what proportion of their routine monitoring is done in the rain. Some of it is, but one wonders how much of it is done in the rain. These samples here are that outfall I showed you near my house. The one upstream is the river upstream. The one on the one on the left is the river upstream. The one on the right is the river downstream, and the two in the middle are the motorway discharge. And you really don't need to analyse that, do you, to see that that's causing gross pollution of the river. And it is frustrating that it's down to people like me to do that, and that's 800 quid worth of analysis right there. So it's difficult and frustrating, but we have to do it because this is the way we start to get pressure on highway authorities. The other thing to think about, don't worry about this chemistry at all. This is just making a point. If you've got 42 of these, what is the cumulative impact of that pollution on the river catchment? So this is one of the ones on the River Douglas. This is actually the one where I showed you the photograph of me in my blue anorak taking the sample. But this is one of 42. So what's the cumulative effect of those outfalls on the River Douglas catchment? It's huge and unmeasured. And so we have to think about that sediment buildup. What effect is the sediment having? Where is the sediment settling? Because that's where it exerts its pollution, its toxic effects. So it might not settle where it comes out of the pipe. It might settle half a mile downstream. And so you've got toxic effects sort of seeping out of the sediment and affecting the invertebrates that live on the bottom of the river. But nobody knows. Everybody goes, well, I don't know where that's coming from because there's no outfalls here. But it's actually travelling down the river from the highway outfall. And I worry about, I don't eat shellfish because in the Ribble estuary, we've got shell fisheries, and yet this stuff is going down the Douglas into the River Ribble estuary. Where's it going? What's it doing? I don't like it. Sorry if anybody's eating oysters for tea. And then this is again, I try and make sure I'm a little bit more balanced. This is a local authority highway outfall. So the other ones I showed you were all national highways highway outfalls. This is a local authority highway outfall going into the River Ribble, where that little red cross is. And we sampled this, and this is also failing the environmental quality standards. So we sampled all these roads. All of these roads are local authority roads with various traffic densities. Church Brow, not a very high traffic density, but they all failed the environmental quality standard for priority hazardous substances every time we sampled them. Difference is, and this is quite difficult to get your head around with actually seeing the maps, but the catchments for these will be small. So if you think about your local road, it's only one track, it's only one lane, no, two lane. Do you know what I mean? It's only two lanes. And it's also, there's quite a small catchment to each, every time it crosses a stream, there's an outfall. So each outfall isn't very big. On the motorway, you've got 8 or 10 lanes, and then much bigger stretches that come down to the motorway. So although the pollution is still equivalent, catchment areas are huge on the motorway, which is why I get cross about it. And this is what we really ought to think about. So we talk about chemistry all the time, and I take samples of the chemistry all the time, and we talk about sewage pollution all the time. But actually, what matters is what's happening in the river, what's happening to the creatures that live in the river. And this, some of you may be familiar with river fly, where you go and count the insects in the river. This is my latest river fly, but this is last year's river fly results. And you can see that upstream at Town Lane, which is upstream of the motorway outfall, it scored 8. In the park, which again is upstream of the motorway, it scored 10, just a better substrate, better environment. Stag Lodge, which is really close to the motorway outfall, just downstream, scored 9. And then you go downstream further and it scores 4. And that's what I mean about we don't really understand the toxic effects of these discharges. Immediately downstream of the motorway, not too bad, frankly. And then we found a little stickleback. And I was saying to this stickleback, go away. You're not supposed to, this is supposed to be the polluted stretch. What are you doing? So you can't account for aquatic wildlife. They go where they want. But if you go further down where there's a sediment deposition, you find a lower score. So we need to, I'm not an entomologist. Perhaps Dave can help next time he's on, but we need to unpick that in more detail. But this is what we should be measuring far more for sewage pollution as well. We don't know what effect the sewage pollution is actually having on the aquatic life within the river and on the diatoms and on the aquatic plants. And we desperately need more information so we know how to target pollution prevention. And the other thing we need to do, and this is a moral thing really, these guys, these are some pals of mine. Some of them are volunteers, some of them work for groundwork. They do fantastic work on a grotty little river called the River Tord in a place called Skelmersdale, which is one of those rivers that's been unloved and overlooked for decades. And this little gang of people decided to turn that around, and they've taken a grip of the river. And they do litter picks, they do river restoration, they talk to local people about keeping the river clean. They've done stuff with the footpaths. And there are groups like this on every river in England, pretty much. And sorry, in Wales and Scotland as well. But I work with River Guardians, which is England, and they're fantastic people. They're the backbone of Britain, aren't they? These people, and I'm sure some of them are on the call tonight. But if they're doing all that work to improve the river environment and river health, and we don't fix the chemical problem, then that's just shameful. We need to underwrite all this fantastic work that these people do by fixing river water quality, and that's what we're trying to do. So this is the things you can do. Collecting evidence is really important, but it can just be visual. So you can just go out with your phone and take a video or a photo and go, look, because that's enough to start to unlock the story and say, this is a highway outfall, it's causing pollution. Who owns it? Is it the local authority? Is it the water company? Or is it National Highways? Which road is it coming from? What can we do to make it better? So just take videos and photos to start with. Do Riverfly if you can, but be careful with your Riverfly. Like I said, it may look really nice just downstream of the motorway, but you need to find the pollution. Chemical samples are great, but they're expensive. We are trying to persuade the manufacturers to manufacture better field tests that we can do for this. And local knowledge is brilliant. You might know, especially as a rivers trust or a wildlife trust, you might know that somebody's delivering a wetland or a drainage infrastructure improvement scheme for a local nature reserve, and you can incorporate the treatment of highway runoff into things like that, and then we can do a partnership project with National Highways. That would be nice. Using your membership of catchment partnerships to influence the Environment Agency, because if they would sample these, then they would find the pollution, and then that pollution would go into the river basin plans, and then somebody somewhere at DEFRA would go, crikey, this is a massive problem we hadn't noticed before. And so we're sort of playing them at their own game and feeding information into their own repository so that they then start to see the magnitude of the problem. We have written a little guide on how citizen scientists can do this work, and I'm happy to share that with you via Louise. And just to finish on a few cheerful slides, slightly more optimistic side, shall we say? We do know how to treat this stuff. So this is, I imagine none of you are in Sheffield this evening because that wouldn't make sense. This is the retrofit sustainable drainage system in Sheffield. It's called Sheffield Grey to Green. Frankly, if you haven't decided where you're going on your holidays next year, go to Sheffield. These are the best sustainable drainage systems in England. I love them. And in fact, somebody started posting on X yesterday. They'd visited them this week. And in the autumn, they are beautiful. So the planting regime is planted such that there are colourful flowers all year round for pollinator species. And they're planted so that they're dense and bushy and deep. And so there's places for amphibians to go and hibernate and for creatures to hide from the hot sunshine in the summer. They are fantastic. And the road runoff from that road goes straight over the edge of the road and into that drainage device. And the pollutants will be captured in the soil, they'll be taken up by the plants, and they'll be broken down by natural processes. That's how we treat highway runoff in rural, suburban, and residential areas. The pollutant load is low enough that that can cope, and it's fantastic. You can have swales as well. This is a swale. This is a swale in a place called Chorley, and it was a rubbish swale because they mowed it every week during the summer, and it was just grass and it looked awful. So then they thought, oh, we'll stop mowing it and we'll turn it into a bioswale, which has more growth and more depth, so it's better at capturing the pollutants. And then the local residents complained and said, why have you stopped mowing the swales? It looks scruffy. So now they mow half a metre on either side of the swale and leave the bit in the middle so that it looks properly managed. It looks like they've purposefully managed that, so which they have, and it's pretty good. So again, the runoff comes straight off the road and goes into the swale, and all those natural processes take out the pollution, and they're great because they provide a barrier between the roads and the pedestrians, and they look nice in the summer as well. So that's fine again for residential and rural roads and suburban roads. For motorway runoff, you need to get a bit chunkier. So for motorway runoff, you need a manufactured treatment device, and this is one. There are many on the market. This is a vortex grit separator, but they capture the sediment. So it's a bit like a Dyson cleaner for stormwater. The stormwater comes in and goes spinning around, and the sediment goes to the bottom. So you need at least one of those, and then a pond for treating motorway runoff. So it's harder, but we know how to do it, and we have probably a dozen British manufacturers manufacturing these devices. So let's get on with it. And this is a pond. So you have a vortex grit separator and then a pond like this one. And this is a new one, which was built by Cheshire East Council, which is again lovely. And if you've got a bit of spare money left at the end, you can put a closure device on the bottom so that if there's a big spill, you can close it. So don't worry about the design detail, but the point is we can fix this pollution. We know how to do it. It's not very difficult. We just need loads of money. And I think this is a useful slide. This is the sludge that we took out of one of those vortex separators on the River Douglas. So that's one outfall off of a catchment it's got 42 motorway outfalls and probably 42 highway outfalls off the rest of the highway network, all of them discharging that sludge into the river 150 times a year when it rains with no treatment except this one. And you can see from that sludge, we do not want that in our rivers. So that's what the treatment devices remove. So we can do this, we can do it together. That's a photo of me giving a presentation. You can tell by my animated arm, I'm giving a presentation. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of conferences and stuff just to try and get everybody investigating and interrogating this pollution. It is horrific. It's widespread, it's toxic, it's bioaccumulative, it's having massive effects on our ocean health, but we know how to fix it. We just need more money in the pot. I'm pleased to say the Department for Transport have just literally last week put some money in the pot to fix this. We don't know how much yet. It might be £3.50. I hope not. But they have put some money in the pot, so that's good. And by all of us working together and campaigning, giving presentations, writing to your MP. I met a lady last week who'd written a song about her river. That sort of stuff is what raises the profile of this pollution, and that's what will fix it. So that's me. I'll leave my contact details up in case anybody wants to contact me privately and tell me off. And we'll, with Louise's help, take a little bit of time to look at the questions in the Q&A, if that's okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Jo. That was fantastic. A lot of information there and really enlightening. I was quite shocked to hear that the EA do not do any monitoring.
Not at all.
Not at all, no.
Not even a little bit.
That was quite a shock to me. And also that it cost £200 to do the chemical testing on the samples, I think.
That's because for the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, the environmental quality standards are parts per trillion. And in fact, they're less than 1 part per trillion. And the only lab that can do that commercially is in Prague. So my samples go to Coventry and then they're parceled up and they're sent to Prague because the lab that I use, ALS Environmental, who are brilliant, but in order to go down to that level of determination, they have to send them off to Prague.
Yeah.
That's why it's expensive. Well, I think that's why it's expensive.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay,
I was just looking at Chris's question. Chris has asked, has anyone attempted to sue the Environment Agency for not managing highway runoff? Oh, Chris, I'd love to do that. I've talked to quite a lot of people about taking a judicial review against the Environment Agency for failing to enforce the environmental permitting regulations. We could very easily do that, but we'd need about £70,000, I'm told. So at the moment, I can't afford it. I have formally complained about this to the Office for Environmental Protection, and that complaint is with them at the moment. They don't investigate all complaints, so I can't say for sure whether they'll investigate, but that's the first step, I think. And I have spoken to Fish Legal, about potentially taking a judicial review against the agency, but it's a slog, but I'd love to do it. Sean has asked, do you know if the motor industry are contributing to the solution? And yet, funnily enough, somebody asked me exactly this question earlier today. So yes, the tyre manufacturers are trying to reduce the harmful chemicals in their tyres, which is good. They're also trying to reduce the amount of tyre wear particles that your tyre makes as it drives, which is good. But obviously they can't do that completely because otherwise you would skid. So they have to have some friction. But they are trying to reduce the number of particles created. The clutch and brake pad manufacturers are being pressed in Europe to reduce the amount of dust that comes off them. So there is stuff going on there, but you can't eliminate this pollution because you'll always have brake dust and you'll always have tyre wear particles. So, and there's a thing called Euro Code 7, which the European Union have introduced, which has some of those controls in it. We don't have to adopt that because we're not in Europe anymore, but the government have said they are committed to retaining the same standards as Europe. So theoretically, they should adopt Euro Code 7. So watch this space. Who's maintaining the Sheffield Suds? Sheffield Council are maintaining them. Well, in fact, they're not. They contract it out to an organisation called the Green Estate, who are fab, and they do maintenance of it. That is funded. I think that's funded in perpetuity. Many suds that are delivered in the UK do not have funded maintenance and fall into disrepair very quickly. So you may know suds near your house. I like that. Carlisle, somebody on the call from Carlisle. Do you mean Carlisle in Cumbria? That's good. So yes, the runoff gardens, lots of cities are doing lots of rain gardens slowly. What we're promoting is that when a local authority does a road widening or a roundabout improvement or new bus stops or a cycle path, that when they're doing those improvements anyway, they retrofit suds because it's expensive to just retrofit suds for the sake of it. But if they do it like that, it can be cost effective. The water companies as well, and Keith will tell you this in his call, the water companies, in order to take highway runoff out of the sewer to reduce sewer spills, they are also delivering retrofit suds in some towns and cities. And some local authorities are doing it because they specifically want to reduce flooding. So sometimes it's driven by flood risk. And in London, they've got a process where when Cadent or power companies dig up roads to do things, they retrofit suds as they're leaving. So instead of restoring a concrete surface or a paved surface, if possible, they retrofit with a sustainable drainage system. So yeah, it's a start. You're right, Kevin. It's a start, and that's all we can ask for, isn't it? We can't ask for them to fix this overnight. Barry, don't ask that question. Where does the sludge from the vortex separators go? It is toxic waste. It's hazardous waste. By definition, it's treated, and at the moment goes to landfill almost always. That's another question somebody asked me earlier today. It is a problem. We don't have an obvious disposal route for this stuff. I can tell you for sure the disposal route shouldn't be the river. So it's this balance, isn't it? We're in fixing one problem, we're kind of creating another. But I'm okay with that because I think in the future we may find a way to render it harmless and we'll never be able to spread it to agricultural land because it's full of metals. So I don't know. Somebody was using it to create breeze blocks at some point, but I don't think it worked very well. But examples from other countries. Thank you, David. America, actually, weirdly, parts of America are very good at this. They have a stormwater levy. So that's the missing link. Germany have a stormwater levy. Every house pays a stormwater levy for the management of stormwater, which creates money to do this. So Germany are quite good. They tend to use great big concrete tanks rather than ponds, but I don't care. And in America and California, they're pretty good at this. I'll tell you the difference between here and California, apart from the sunshine and the sharks. They have a maintenance budget. So they will maintain their devices, almost weekly, some of them, and have armies of people who do maintenance. We just don't have that. People say to me, why don't we use trash screens in the UK? Why don't we have baskets in our drainage infrastructure that catch crisp packets and things? And the answer is very simple, is because you would have to empty them every week. And nobody in this country has got the money to empty them every week. So yeah, America are good. Bits of America are good. Germany are good. Some of the Scandinavian countries are quite good, although they focus more on salt pollution because of all the freezing conditions. Vietnam are rubbish. Spain are pretty rubbish. So globally it varies, but yeah, we're no worse. We're not worse than anybody else. That's about the best I can say. Mike has asked, what opportunities for volunteers, citizen scientists to work on the road runoff? Well, find your local highway outfalls and go and look at them for me. Videos, photographs, samples, riverfly data. We, it, all I ask is that I know about it, because then when I'm talking to national highways hate it when I go, this outfall here has been monitored by the local volunteers and they found this, because the more outfalls we unpick, the stronger our evidence base becomes. So that's certainly stuff people go, oh, it says Preston based in brackets. Yeah, well, drop me an email, Mike, and I'll send you out in the rain.
Got some exotic people on here.
So there are some exotic. That's great. But yeah, mostly for volunteers, it's a question of gathering evidence and information so that we can feed that up to MPs, local authorities, highway authorities, because the more bang for our buck. There are 3 groups. There's a lovely couple who live in Devon who were angry about a new road, and they've been doing loads of research with me. There's a group working on the River Chess, and they've taken some samples and found truly dreadful pollution off the M1. And then there's a group of anglers, the Angling Trust in Cumbria at T-Bay, have also taken some samples and found some dreadful pollution. So I've said to those 3 people, would they write a joint letter to the Minister for Transport and the Minister for Environment saying, look, we've done this work as volunteers and we've found this horrific pollution. What are you going to do about it? Because the more voices, the better. Because National Highways just think I'm just a pain in the bum. I have no idea how many vehicles are in the UK. Somebody do a Google quickly while we're... Sorry, Sam, I don't know. But it's lots. I mean, it's millions. It's literally millions. And I think it's going up still, which is pants. Patching Pond. Where's Patching Pond? Worthing, West Sussex, by the A27.
Yeah, so that's down this area, Jo.
Bulk salt storage. I'm happy to talk to you about that. Salt storage is a bit of a nightmare. And there was a long period of time when they didn't cover salt storage, and their argument was, once it's been rained on once, the salt forms a crust, and then no more salt washes off the salt store pile. That's when my alarm goes off that I've been told lies. But yeah, happy to talk about that. Salt. In the UK, we don't see fish death as a result of salt pollution. We just never see it in the winter. In other countries, they do see it when they get snow melt. They see fish deaths. We don't see it. I think it's something to do, and I'm not a fish person, but I think it's something to do with the fact that the river's already cold and the fish they sort of hibernate, fish, don't they? I think, or at least they go down in the river. And I wonder if
they go down.
Yeah, so I wonder if they're protected as the salt whooshes, but that's not very scientific. Grit, Philip's asked about the grit and salt. Yeah, I think actually the physical effect is probably just as bad as the salt effect. Fish's gills are really sensitive to nasty gritty stuff. So that's why the sediment, and I suspect road salt, is horrible for aquatic life. Oh, yes, Sam. Oh, crikey, Sam, you've been doing your research. Yes, water fleas can cope with some of the pollutants. In fact, the only creatures, do you remember that image I showed you of Sid Brook with 3 outfalls and that dirty brown grey pond? The only creatures we found in that pond were water fleas and bloodworms. And there is, I suspect Sam's referring to a sort of new thought process that you can use water fleas to ingest the pollution in a tank somewhere and then harvest the water fleas, and then that cleans up the water. I'm not entirely sure about the ethics of poisoning water fleas on purpose, but I don't know. It's definitely been used for phosphorus capture and removal, I think, but I'm not aware of anybody using it for highway runoff yet. But I suspect it's being thought about. Richard, hello, Richard. I've spoken to you before. and in fact, you sent me an email about you working on the River Loon, aren't you, at T-Bay? 50 million vehicle tyres sold in the UK per annum. That's terrifying, isn't it? And also what happens. Somebody else I talk to a lot talks about the fact that we use shredded tyres and tyre crumb in football pitches, multi-use games areas. And that causes another pollution problem because when it rains on those, they're usually under-drained, and that under-drainage is absolutely rammed with microplastic tire wear particles. And in fact, somebody sent me a newspaper article today about a road in Scotland, Motherwell, I think, and they've used tire flakes, they called them, which I've never heard of before, in the construction of the road. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It made my blood run slightly cold, and then I thought, well, maybe if they're locked in, I don't know.
No.
So I think I'm exhausted. Oh no, there's more questions, Greg.
Still coming in.
Samantha, parts of the Friends of the, where's the Ada? How do you say that?
Ada.
Is that Ada estuary? The A27. Somebody else has mentioned the A27 further up.
Yeah, that's our big road that goes right across the south coast. So it kind of joins up Brighton and Southampton, more or less.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a lot of rivers that go underneath the A27 and they come out,
yes,
to the harbour and the beaches.
Yes, and they will all be polluting. And in fact, Samantha said they're downpipes going into the ground near the river. That sounds grim. So yes, do investigate. Please remember, and I must say this because I get told off, you mustn't ever go on motorway networks or motorway owned property to investigate pollution. It's illegal unless you get explicit written permission and you go through some special training. So A roads is you can use your normal common sense, but please be very careful. Trunk roads and motorways, you mustn't stop on the hard shoulder, which I'm sure you all know, but also you mustn't go over a fence to get to an outfall. But you can buy a 5 meter sampling pole that you can stick through the fence and take a sample of highway runoff. But you must be very careful with the 5 meter sampling pole. You don't lift it up with the electric wires above you. So lots of health and safety. So please be careful out there. Yeah, intertidal. You see, that just means the pollution goes backwards and forwards, which is awful. But yes, do email me with info and questions, and I'd be happy to help. I'm out tomorrow filming with a lady who paddleboards all around England and wants to paddleboard on the canal where the motorway runoff comes in. Take a sample for me, so that will be cool.
Oh, wow.
I can't reach it. It's on the far side of the canal. And I can't legally get to it from that side of the canal because it's National Highways land. So we're going to get a lady to paddleboard up the canal and take a sample for me, which we can do legally. So always ways and means.
But yeah, I like the inventive way that you're looking at this. Yes, I'm thinking that a lot of the rivers that we work on do go underneath the A27, and I'm absolutely certain that it is polluting our rivers, and that particularly the River Lavant, which is my local river, which comes through Chichester and then goes out straight into Chichester Harbour, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think am I right in thinking that Portsmouth University are doing some research on Chichester Harbour?
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of research going on the water quality on Chichester Harbour.
And I think some of that research may be looking at the effects of highway runoff. So it would be worth keeping an eye on what Portsmouth Uni are up to. And also I get muddled between Portsmouth and Plymouth universities, but I think is it Portsmouth University where Richard Thompson hangs out, he's the national microplastics expert and does masses of research on microplastics and does some research for National Highways. So if you are taking samples, maybe consider linking up with the university and seeing if they'll do the analysis for you free of charge. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be nice.
I'll put my email address if I can work out how to put it in the chat, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Because I can't put this, I don't know how to put the slide back up. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I can join the chat.
Can you put the slide back up?
Can probably put the slide back up. Let me just close the chat. Might be a good place to finish, mightn't it, with the slide back up. last slide, of course. So I'll have to do a doodle. You'll have to watch it all again. I'll do it all again for you.
Yeah. We'd love to hear it all again, Jo.
Oh no, don't. That's it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then you can copy down. Follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in this topic. I do talk about all sorts of nonsense on LinkedIn, but I do also do posts about highway runoff. We
Yes.
are making, I said to Louise earlier before we opened the call, we are making progress. I met with DFT earlier this week, the Department for Transport, and they're going to change the way they measure National Highways delivery of pollution prevention. So that's good. The Department for Transport have also just said they're going to give a pot of money to National Highways for the next 5 years to deliver water pollution prevention schemes, which is good. Although, as I say, we're not entirely sure how much money it will be. I met DEFRA today. They're going to try and make sure that highway runoff pollution is recognised in all these changes that are afoot. So the new regulator and the new regional water authorities that are coming at us, they're going to try and make sure that highway runoff is included in those. So there are good news stories. We are edging forward inch by inch, but we are at least edging forward.
That's brilliant.
It's take,
Jo.
taken 10
A
years.
few people have asked for the guide that you mentioned. So
Okay.
if you can send me the link to that, then I can
I'm
share
afraid
it with everyone.
it's just a PDF document, so I'll send you the document. I don't have a link. I've not got it on my
Okay.
website, but I will send it by all means. And also I'll send a link to the very long document that's got all the detail in, just in case anybody would like that.
Perfect. Thank you, Jo. I think we've answered all the questions, or you've answered all the questions. I haven't answered any of them.
I'm happy if I'm able. But yes, keep in touch. And if you find it helpful and you want to ask me, we found this, and you will often find them with very strange treatment devices that you don't know what they are. So by all means, have a look on Google Earth first. There's some great images on Google Earth. And also, if you can access Google Pro Earth, which is the slightly posher one, you can go back in time. And that's really cool because you can find your bit of highway where you think you've got an outfall that's bothering you and go back in time, if you're lucky, to when it was built. And if you can see the Google images from when it was built, you'll be able to see the detail of the drainage infrastructure very often. And that's really cool because then you can see where the outfall should be and then go and find it. So, yeah, have a look at that.
Well, there's one last question. What percentage of the pollution was tyre pollution?
Yeah, I don't know, Kate. I don't know. We haven't got enough research on the tyre wear particle component of the suspended solids. So the suspended solids, there might be 400 milligrams per litre suspended solids in a badly polluted highway discharge. I don't know what proportion of that is tyre wear particles. There are people doing research at the moment in trying to find a way to measure that, but they haven't quite cracked it yet. The only way at the moment, the only way to work out how many tyre particles you've got in a sample is to put the sample under a microscope and poke it with a stick and find them. And we can't do that. That's too time consuming. So there are quite a few universities, partly in Sweden and in England, trying to work out which chemical you measure as a proxy for how much tyre wear particle there is, and they haven't done it yet. It's too hard. It's in the too hard box. But I won't get too hung up about it because good treatment will remove as much of the sediment as possible. And that will remove a lot of the tyre wear particles. Right now, let's just do that. We'll worry about the residual tyre wear particles after I've retired.
You're not allowed to retire, Jo.
10 years left. 10 years left to fix this, and then I'll worry.
That's the deadline, is it?
That's the deadline. Cool.
Thank you so
you all
much,
very
Jo.
much.
I really, really appreciate you doing that, and everyone found it really interesting. So, thank you very much. And
Fine. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you'll be bombarded with emails now from people.
That's fine. I'm around on Friday to do emails. Like I say, I'm out. Keep an eye on my LinkedIn because hopefully I'll post a picture of I'm not paddleboarding. I would fall in. But, yeah, paddleboarding experience tomorrow.
Yes, I do recommend following Jo on LinkedIn. Really, really excellent posts on there, really informative.
I'm very lucky because I have the freedom to say what I want because I work for a small organisation. When I used to work for the Environment Agency, you had to be careful what you said, but not anymore. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jo.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.